Looking for the best opportunities in Perth property? Get the local area expertise you need from Momentum Wealth, WA's trusted property investment consultants. Market insights, advice and representation from award-winning buyers agents and REWA Hall of Fame inductees. Visit Momentum Wealth's website at momentumwealth.com.au to organise your obligation-free consultation today.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
Hi everyone, hope you're well. Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show. I'm your host, Phil Tarrant. I've been doing this now for about 3 or 4 years, so I'd like to think I'm a lot more informed about property investment, and no doubt it's better now than what it was when we first kicked off. I was probably stumbling through most of my sentences. So the more you do stuff, the better you get at it, and that definitely applies for property investors. Property investors who've been around a lot longer, they've got a bit of scar tissue, a lot of skin in the game. They normally learn from their mistakes. So a big thrust of the Smart Property Investment Show is being able to learn from other people. And that's the reason why we have so many investor stories, people coming in, telling us about what they did, what they didn't do, what worked, what didn't work, what they wouldn't do again, what they would do again, and some of their failures and fears investing in property. But we generally connect that in with experts right across the nation to come and lend their views on what's going on to help us make more informed decisions. And I'm very fortunate that I'm pretty connected across property and can pick up the phone and speak to anyone to give me insights into what's happening. And that's what I do on the Smart Property Investment Show. I do that live so I can share those conversations with you. Our guest today is very much geared towards that. Peter Koulizos, he is the chairman of the Property Investment Professionals Australia. Pippa, we know each other quite well. We've been in this game for a little while. Him a lot longer than me. He actually knows what he's talking about when it comes to property. I just gibber on. Peter, how are you going? You well?
I'm very good indeed, thank you. You're very modest, my friend. I'm sure you know lots and lots and lots. Just because I'm older doesn't mean I know more than you or I'm better than you.
Well, age doesn't always translate into wisdom, Peter. But for those that don't know, Peter, you also go by the handle of the property professor, right?
Correct, because I'm the program director for the Master of Property at the University of Adelaide. That's my paid job.
Yep.
But yeah, as a volunteer, I'm the chair of Pippa. Yeah.
So tell us about Pippa. I'm quite familiar with Pippa. I sat on the board for many years. What does Pippa do and how do you help property investors?
Okay, so first, the reason why Pippa was founded was because there were and there still are too many rogues in property investment. So people masquerading as giving property investment advice, but they're really just property spruikers to try and suck people into, in particular, buying off-the-plan apartments. You know, they show them all these wonderful tax deductions, but what people don't realise is if you're going to get a tax refund, it's because you're making a loss. So we were found to try and educate people in property investment advice. So we're an industry group, so we're trying to help those people in industry to be better educated so that when they give advice to people, people are more likely to maximise their profits rather than risk making a loss. So we have a course called the Qualified Property Investment Advisors course that people can do, 6 modules, but you only want to do that if you're going to give advice. But if you still want to be a member because you support our basic principle of keeping everybody honest and clean, then you can still become a member of Pippa. Just go to pipa.asn.au and you'll find out a lot more about Pippa. And also I've just started doing short videos. So one's quite topical. One's on, and this is before New South Wales announced that they were going to change or give the option of an annual property tax instead of stamp duty. So there's one on, are we better off with the stamp duty or an annual property tax? There's one on capital growth versus rental return. And there's a couple of others that I can't remember. But it's not just for industry people, these videos, but it's also for property investors to better inform and educate themselves.
Yeah, I highly recommend go and check it out. There's a lot of great resources also. It's pipa.asn.au. Yep, all right, nice one, Peter. Now, it's a bit of a crazy market at the moment. No one knows what's happening. We heard in New South Wales changes to stamp duty, land tax. We'll get into that. But one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on today is, and it probably lends itself to your day job in terms of property, I want to have a chat to you about development and where people are getting it right and where people are getting it wrong in this current marketplace. And we've got to frame that within definitely a property market in flux. But before we get there, and while I've got you on, and I know you're a commentator right across Australia when it comes to property, you turn to for many people, including myself. By memory, if my memory serves me right, you're in Adelaide, so you're locked up at the moment. Is that correct? How's
That's
that
right,
going?
mate. We are not allowed to step outside our property. We're not even allowed to exercise. So today is day one of that. So I've kept myself busy today because I've been marking. But the good news or the bad news is I finished all my marking now just before I came on to talk to you. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing for the next 5 days. But anyway, we'll sort something out. But yeah, we're in severe lockdown.
Yeah, they reckon it's one of the most draconian in the world, up there with what they did in Argentina and I think Israel. And they're talking about this being this particular strain of the virus is quite aggressive and incubates really quickly. So they're talking about a 6-day lockdown. They've shut down real estate, haven't they, for the weekend?
No auctions, no open inspections, no takeaway food. Schools are closed, universities are closed. So we never had it this severe when it first came around in March or April. But yeah, it is quite severe. It does incubate quite quickly. So what we're looking at is a 6-day very severe lockdown and then followed by another 8 days, not as severe, because what they want is to try and make everything as normal as possible for Christmas, to give us the best chance of having all the borders open so friends and family can go visit each other interstate.
So it's like a big reset. And what's everyone think about the decisions from the Premier? They call him, instead of Chairman Dan, it's now Chairman Andrews,
Chairman
right?
Steve.
Chairman Steve. Is everyone happy with it? Is everyone going, okay, let's just cop it on the chin for 6 days?
Well, we are so far. It's only day one, but nobody's protesting out in the streets. It is 36 degrees today, so I don't think anyone's going to be outside protesting anyway. But, I mean, we'll see what it's like day 4, 5 and 6. But it's okay so far. You know, we can see what's happened in other places around the world if you don't control it. Yes, it's a bit draconian, but look, if the rest of Australia and the rest of the world can learn from this little experiment, if it really works well or it doesn't work that well, and then, you know, at least it's good. Like you started off the show with saying you want people to listen into the show and listen from other people's mistakes and experiences. Well, this severe lockdown is going to be one of those things. It could be just a small experiment. Well, unfortunately, we're the guinea pigs to see what happens.
Well, you know, you South Australians are pretty compliant with most things, so it's probably a good place for it to happen as long as you got some. What's that local beer you got down there that tastes like horse?
Tastes really good.
Yeah.
Coopers, mate.
There you go.
Or Pirate Life out. It's a very, very good craft beer, Pirate Life.
Well, I hope you're stocked up because I saw some of the pictures on the internet of everyone lining up, sort of chasing, make sure they got enough pasta and beer and toilet paper. But anyway,
and toilet paper, yeah.
But you know, here we are. So this is really frames the Australia's, you know, how it's heading for the moment. You know, we don't know. We thought, hey, we're doing really well. Melbourne sort of went through some pretty tough period of time. They bounced back. They've locked it up. They've shut the place down. Now they've sort of largely eradicated the virus out of community transmission. That's really cool. Everyone thought, hey, that's it. We can move on. But it just goes to show how we can spike back into these scenarios really quickly. So lots of ramifications of that. But thinking about property markets, Peter, this is the environment we're going to be in until we have a vaccine, and that vaccine is readily available and it works. And who knows when that's going to happen. So as a property investor, you're a property investor, I'm a property investor, we're speaking about property investment. How do you feel? What's your sort of overall sentiments to the market right now? Is it a good time to be in real estate in Australia?
Yeah, look, Phil, I did some research when coronavirus first appeared in Australia to try and determine what might happen to property prices based on what happened to property prices in previous recessions in the GFC. So I did this research for Pippa, and I reckon that's one of the other videos that I've got on there that I couldn't remember before. And look, basically what's shown is Australian residential property prices are very resilient. In the 1970s recession, so for the 2 years that we had that recession plus the 5 years afterwards, there was not 1 year where any capital city dropped in price. In the 1980s recession, there was only 1 year in one capital city that it dropped in price. But 5 years after that recession, property prices were up in all capital cities. In the 90s, it was a bit worse because we had the Pyramid Building Society collapse in Victoria. The State Bank of South Australia collapsed as well. We did have our highest unemployment out of any modern recession, which was 11%. But still, 5 years after that recession, property prices were higher. And when I say they dropped, you know, the biggest drop was 1 year, 6% in Sydney. The second biggest was 5% in 1 year in Melbourne. And then we had the GFC. Again, very similar. So if history is going to teach us any lessons, property prices are not going to plummet like many people thought they would or spruiked that they would. And here we are 7 months after coronavirus entered Australia, and in most capital cities, property prices are higher, only a little bit, but they're higher than they were back in March, unlike many spruikers were saying it was going to drop by 30 or 40%. But one of the reasons that's the case, Phil, is price is a function of demand and supply. Yes, COVID-19 has put fear into some people, and so they are less likely to buy property, but also there are a lot less people willing to sell their property. So supply is way down, demand is also down. That's why price is relatively stable. 1 or 2% up or down is really neither here nor there. So property prices are relatively stable. And unlike the other recessions we had JobKeeper to keep us safe, JobSeeker, banks provided mortgage holidays. We'd never had that before. So, the government and the banking sector all came together to provide an economic airbag. And so, look, one of the main complaints I'm getting from property investors is they can't find property to buy. It's not that they're worried that their property is going to drop in price. They can't find property to buy.
So considering what those numbers and that narrative you just gave us, Peter, why were banks so bearish at the start of COVID talking about price drops potentially of 30%? One of the banks with yellow in its logo came out. Pretty much it was calling worst case like 30%. The immediate lessons from the 70s, the 80s, the GFC, which said there is resilience in Australian property. So why did they do that, do you think? What concerned them?
Look, I don't know the people in the banks that are forecasting this. I'm sure they know lots about banking and finance. I'm not sure if they know about consumer behaviour when it comes to property owners and property investors. But it's certainly one worst case scenario was 30%. Most of them said that it would drop around 12, 13, 14% in the most probable case scenario. But no one got anywhere near close to that, and neither have we done that in the last 50 years. So, Phil, I don't know why they came up with those numbers. All they needed to do was to see what happened, not what's happened in other countries, because the Australian property market is very different. We are very dominated by owner-occupiers, other countries not so much. And we have an obsession with buying our own home, whereas other countries where property is so expensive, they've given up on that dream. So, our psyche when it comes to property is very different to other countries. But if we looked at what happened to Australian property prices in the past through other economic downturns, somebody with, some insight into property or property owners or property investors should have worked out, it's not going to be good for the economy. We'll probably go into recession, which we did. Unemployment will go up, which it will. But you know what? Because of simple demand and supply, I don't think, property prices are not going to drop that much. They're also not going to zoom up, but they're not going to plummet either.
Why is it then, Peter, and this is sort of getting into property economics, why is it that Australia gets bundled up by global Western counterparts, nations saying it's a huge bubble, the bubble will burst, and the reasons why is sort of debt to income ratios on a World Bank or an IMF, framework or benchmark, that it is so far out of kilter with the rest of the world. Therefore, there's something needs to happen in order for that bubble to burst. And maybe it was supposed to be COVID-19. Like, why does the rest of the world see us so out of kilter with everyone else?
I don't know. Look, it certainly makes the headlines, Phil. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about it.
Yeah.
But I agree 100% with you. And another issue that I have is housing affordability, where people are screaming out that housing is unaffordable in Australia. Housing is expensive in Australia, no doubt. But that's because it was just last week that we were second, but now we are top on the list. We have the biggest houses on average in the whole world. So if everything else is equal, but you've got the biggest houses, well, you're going to have the biggest price, aren't you? And consider where most Australians live. Most Australians live in a detached dwelling. You go overseas, most people do not live in a detached dwelling on their own block of land. It's an apartment. And for me, it's not just the debt to income. The key as to whether property is going to plummet or not is whether people can afford to make the mortgage repayment. And one of the key components of a mortgage repayment is the interest rate. And again, I did some research for Pippa a couple of years ago to show that it's actually more affordable, depending on what your definition of affordable is. It's more affordable to buy property today than it was certainly when we bought our first house, because you need less of your annual income to pay off the mortgage. All right, so instead of it being back in the 60s, an average house was 5 times the average income, and today it's now 10 times. Well, houses have also been getting bigger. And in the 50s and 60s, like my parents and my parents-in-law, they didn't build 4-bedroom houses with 2 living areas and 3 bathrooms and a double garage and a theatre room, and they had to have all the mod cons. They built a basic 3-bedroom, 1 bathroom, 1 living area house, and they put the curtains in when they could afford it. And they put the air conditioning in when they could afford it. So we're living in bigger and better houses, therefore they're more expensive. But thanks to interest rates, even though they're more expensive, they're not more unaffordable.
And this is the serviceability metric and the relationship of serviceability with affordability. And we're talking sort of owner-occupier there, but the same applies for property investors. Your ability to service debt and that capacity is an enablement for being a better property investor. Hence the reason why some people are able to build big portfolios, because they buy the right properties at the right time, which generate income, which allows them to keep going and going. So, in your history in sort of working in property and as a property investor and a commentator of property, how would you frame this period we're in right now versus periods in history? Are you bullish about the future for Australians to create wealth through property?
Yeah, look, I mean, this is going to be recorded, so, somebody might throw it in my face when I'm wrong. But I reckon if we take out Sydney and Melbourne, because they've had pretty good rises in property prices, but for the rest of Australia, starting 2021, I reckon it's going to be as good as it has been since 2001, 2002. Because really, that was the last time that property prices boomed nationally. And the main reason is banks are going to put into place more reasonable lending criteria. Rather than this forensic examination of people's expenses and so on, it's going to allow more people to borrow money. That increases demand. And if I could just give a very brief 1-minute lesson on Property Economics 101, I said before that price is a function of demand and supply. The problem here is demand can change like that. So when the government announced $25,000 first home builder grant to first home buyers, bang, next day everybody is out and about looking for their first home. But from the supply side, people can't just magically produce a house. Like, that house is going to take a year. That assumes that they've already got the land subdivided and there's roads and power and stuff in. If they don't even have the land, we're talking 2 or 3 years. So here you have, on the one hand, all of this demand, pent-up demand, but it's not being satisfied because there's not enough supply. And that's exactly what we're going to start to see in March 2021. And it won't just be for new homes, it'll also be for established homes, because in simple terms, some people that can't borrow today will be able to borrow in March, and those people that can borrow today will actually be able to borrow more in March. And this has been instigated by the government, because they can see, unless people can borrow money, not just for property, but for businesses, to expand the economy, we're going to be in the doldrums for a long time. So we need to get ourselves out of this recession. We've learned some very valuable lessons over the last 100 years. In the Great Depression, there was a little bit of stimulus money, but the only stimulus money that was given was the equivalent to the amount of gold that governments were holding. So simple numbers, if they had $1 billion in gold, we can only dish out $1 billion in stimulus money. But you fast forward 100 years to now, countries all over the world are printing money so as to get themselves out of the recession. Because, I don't know one country that's not in recession at the moment. So going back to your original question, sorry, Phil, that lesson on property economics was a bit longer than 1 minute.
No, it's good though.
Yeah, I can see Personally, I'm very excited because I hold a number of investment properties. And if I can hold on to those investment properties for the next 2 or 3 years, they're going to be worth a lot more than what they are today. Poor old Adelaide, just like Brisbane, hasn't done much in the last 12 years since the GFC. So people in Adelaide and Brisbane and Perth should be getting very excited about the future.
So, you talked about the uniqueness of Australia when it comes to property and why it bucks global trends in some of those dynamics. And you gave us that very good sort of 101 on, is that first year university course? Is it 101 property economics? Which is pretty good.
Supply, yeah.
So why do you think, and we'll get into the development stuff in a moment, but it's an important question. Why is the government looking to stimulate the economy by tinkering with property? And by tinkering with property, they've gone, there's all this new land tax sort of stamp duty type situation, and a bit outside the scope of this chat, but they're tinkering with that to make it easier to potentially buy and sell property. They're tinkering with the prudential regulator, which governs the way in which money is lent, and making it essentially a lot easier for banks to issue credit. So that they're tinkering with access to credit as a way to stimulate the economy. But all of this connects in with property. Is that because as an asset class, it's huge, and as a mechanism of the wealth effect for Australians or their view of wealth, it all sits within property. So if they're comfortable and confident about property, it means that their wallets open up. I guess that's probably property economics 101 as well, is it?
It is. You've just answered your own question, mate. You are 100% right. The two, in my opinion, and I've been in property for a while, the two most important determinants of how healthy the property market is availability of credit and consumer confidence. Like, people can be really happy and confident, but if the banks aren't going to lend money, like was the case this year, the year before, and last year, property prices aren't going to go anywhere. But if people are happy and confident, one, because they have a job, that's a very big factor, and two, their house price is going up. Like, you can imagine how fearful people are if property prices are going down. They're not spending money on anything. But if their property prices are going up, they are feeling happy and confident, and they're more likely to go out and buy that extra sandwich during the week, or extra night out, extra holiday, buying a holiday house, upgrading to a bigger house, and it goes on. Providing we are happy and confident, then we are willing to spend our money, and that's good for the economy.
What do you think then, talking about sort of property economics, the natural place for unemployment to sit, and you'll know this better than me, is probably about 5.5% to 6%, thereabouts?
I think it's closer to 5%.
5%. And we're sitting at now at around 7 or 8%,
yeah.
I think. So it's higher than where it should be, but why does all the narrative focus on the people who are unemployed versus all of those people who are employed, who do have jobs, who are comfortable and they're confident and they're driven to creating a better life for themselves through smart investment? Why don't we concentrate on those people in talking about shaping the narrative around property investment?
Yeah. Well, because bad news gets more headlines than good news, mate. Rather than saying, the worst that it's going to get here is 8% unemployment compared to pre-COVID, it was 5%. Why don't we say that, there'll still be 92% people employed? It's the same fact, but it's just a different spin on that same fact. And I think one of the things that should provide some comfort for your listeners here, Phil, is, again, if we go back to the 1990s recession, 11% unemployment, 17.5% interest rates. This time around, 8% unemployment, 3.5% interest rate. So just on those simple measures, this time around, things are not going to be as bad as they were in the 90s. The other problem with the 90s was many of the unemployed were middle management, earning pretty good money. This time around, it's people that are in retail, tourism, hospitality, travel, where generally the incomes are not as high and the tenure is not as secure, like they're often on contracts or casual. Very unfortunate for those people, but when we look at it from a whole societal point of view, because unemployment won't be as high, because interest rates are much lower than they were, and banks are certainly coming to the party with helping their customers, right? We've had bank holidays, for example, already. it's not going to be as bad as it was in the 90s. And in the 90s, it wasn't that bad so far as property prices were concerned anyway.
We're going to go a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk development. Back in a moment.
Whether you're an avid property investor or about to buy your first property, why do it alone when you could partner with Australia's best buyer's agent? Director of Pure Property Investment, Property Investment Professionals of Australia board member and REB Buyer's Agent of the Year, Paul Glossop, can take your portfolio to the next level. Get in touch today to discuss your investment goals. Get one-on-one insight from Paul Glossop. And for the first 100 people, this service is completely free. Head to purepropertyinvestment.com today to schedule your consult with Paul Glossop directly.
Welcome back, everyone. Phil Tarrant, host of the Smart Property Investment Show with Peter Koulizos. I always stumble on that. Koulizos, Peter Koulizos, chairman of the Property Investment Professionals Australia. I've said it 1,000 times. I don't know why I still struggle with it, Peter. But so we've just had a really good 101, which is a fundamental course in universities on property economics. So thanks for sharing that, Peter. And maybe we can do more of this in the future. But let's get into property development. I know this probably lends itself to your day job. And you teach, what is it, the Masters of Property?
The Master of Property at the University of Adelaide. So it's unlike many other property courses which are based on valuation, ours is based on property development and town planning. So Our course is geared towards those people that want to work in the top end of the market, doing feasibility studies on building large office towers or master planned communities, things like that.
Okay, so I want to get into the 10 steps for property investors to be successful in development. But, as someone that teaches this for a living, what was the last thing you knew about how to be better at doing that, considering that you've been teaching it for many, many years? I know most academics are always expanding their view or their opinion on stuff. So how do you go about shaping and changing how you teach this course or keep current or up to date?
Well, I actually do it myself, Phil. So I've actually developed my own properties. Admittedly, they're residential properties. Like I haven't built some 30-story office tower.
Yeah.
But I think, having some skin in the game and subsequently getting to know real people in the real world that can come into class and talk to the students about what's really happening rather than textbooks. And here's something interesting. I don't have textbooks in my courses. I try and make my courses as real life as possible. Yes, we use real life case studies, right? But that's what we learn from rather than, in particular, American textbooks on property development, because that's most of them are. So, doing it myself, speaking with other people involved in the game, town planners, engineers, surveyors, building designers, conveyancers, you get a very good idea of what's happening in the world of property development.
And it sounds like the system works, right?
Yep. Well, we got very happy students, and a very happy head of school, because the students are happy and the students are paying, so we're all happy.
And you just said you were just marking. Are they all passing as well?
No, unfortunately, not all of them. Sorry.
Do most of them go out and get a good job?
Yeah,
in demand?
Look,
yeah.
Unfortunately, for valuation, it's becoming more automated. So there is less need for people to do the actual number crunching. But there are plenty of fields in property other than valuation. There's asset management, facilities management, property management, portfolio management, doing feasibility studies, conveyancing. There's many different areas that will always need a person. Unlike valuation, which can be computerized or automated, many of those jobs cannot. So for people who are interested in property and you're looking for a career in property, look for one that can't be replaced by a computer.
Very good counsel. So let's get into it. 10 steps for effective property development for property investors. And let's frame this, Peter, we're not talking about institutional stuff here where you build a big residential block. We're talking about, let's frame it to maybe duplexes, 3-4 townhouses, a small apartment block, up to 8 or so. So to give it some parameters around it, which is where most, 99% of property investors will probably end up. As only the real top end of town starts dabbling in that big stuff like your Meritons and those alike. So step number 1, to get it right, what is it?
Step number 1 is setting your goal. So before you even start developing, you've got to work out, why am I doing it? Am I doing it because I want to make some quick money, so I'm going to buy something, build it, sell it? Or am I doing it to build a property portfolio? You may not be aware, Phil, but you know Margaret Lomas, who's also on the board of.
Yeah, I know Margaret very well. Very, very successful.
You know that Margaret and I are writing a book together.
Oh, are you? I didn't know that. Margaret, has Margaret got another book in her? I thought she was done by now. She's got about 50 of them, hasn't she?
Yes. We're actually doing one on small scale residential property development.
Oh, well, when it's out, send me a copy and we'll have a discussion on the Smart Property Investment Show.
Love to, mate. Love to. And Margaret's approach is very interesting in that both of the properties that we are showcasing or using as a case study, she's building to keep. And that's a great way to build your property portfolio, because you're really building it at a wholesale price. You're not buying something from somebody else and you have to pay commissions and a premium. You're buying it at a wholesale price, and it's got great tax deductions because it's brand new. But again, that's not the only way to develop. If you want to buy land, subdivide, build and sell, you can do that. But if you're going to keep, then location is very important, because you want to make sure that you build in an area that's going to grow in value compared to other areas. Whereas if you're just going to build and sell, you've got to focus on the numbers. You've got to make sure that you're going to make a profit. And I also encourage my students and property investors to do a feasibility study, but also a scenario analysis. What's the best case? What's the worst case? What's probably going to happen? Which then leads me to step 2 there, Phil, which is research. You need to do your research, because just because you can subdivide the block into 4 double story doesn't mean that that's what you should do. If the market wants single story and you can fit 3 on there, then you are far better off doing 3 single story than you are doing 4 double story. And then there are other smaller items. Do I need 2 bathrooms, or is a 2-way bathroom okay? Double garage, single garage, stone bench top in the kitchen or not? So work out your market, and then you've got a much better chance of making money in a timely fashion. And underline the word timely, because time is money in property development. Because if you've got lots of money outstanding doing this development, the longer it takes you to sell, the more interest you have to pay.
So speed is important when it comes to property investment.
Yeah, very true.
Okay, cool. All right, point number 3, Peter.
Find a development site. Now, that sounds relatively easy. You can look at realestate.com or domain.com, but I'd suggest that's quite passive. I suggest you become more active and contact local real estate agents and let them know that you're serious and you're looking to buy development sites, because what is implied in that, if you buy some land from an agent to develop, generally you will sell through that agent, and then you develop a relationship. Now, what you'll find is there will be lots of development sites, potential development sites, but most of them are not profitable. So you've got to find the profitable ones. So you're only going to do one at a time, right? So choose the best one. And the sorts of things you should be looking for is a location, but more micro location. Whether you're going to keep them long-term or short-term, ideally they should be close to schools, shops, public transport. Topography, in other words, the lay of the land. Ideally, you want a flat block of land, because if it's not flat and you have to cut and or fill, that can get very expensive. Yeah, so once you start searching, you will find many possible development sites, but you're only going to do one. Choose the best one. Next,
yes,
draw up the plans. Now, if you're going to build your dream home, you might go to an architect, but if you're just going to if you're going to develop to sell or use for investment properties, a building designer that understands what you want. I mean, any building designer can design you a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-story townhouse, for example, right? But you need to tell them how to configure it. Do you want an ensuite plus another bathroom? Do you want a bedroom downstairs? Do you want a double garage downstairs? And you'll be able to tell them that by going back to steps 2, which is doing your research.
Just on that point, Peter, and I get the sort of plans bit, and it's important. So you're talking about you want to commoditize it as much as possible. So a nice flat block of a size which sort of suits council needs to develop. In terms of plans, can you, or is there a way in which you just go, hey, look, a lot of blocks are the same size. Someone must have done something beforehand that works. Can you go somewhere and buy it off the internet, plans in a box, and just go, hey, build that, rather than tinkering with it and changing it?
No, because they would all have copyright. But generally, if you go to a building designer or an architect that's done a lot of this stuff in a particular area, then they can just modify one that they have already done.
So that's cheaper, obviously.
Yeah, it'll be cheaper.
Yeah, because that's what they do for a living. You just go, hey, I want to build this. I want to make as much money as possible. What have you done beforehand? What's worked? Just copy that and tweak it a little bit. Make it blue instead of black, right? But anyway, I'm always looking for shortcuts, don't worry. So point number 5, Peter.
Crunch the numbers. This, Phil, is really important. This is going to determine whether your project is a success or not. So everybody, whether you are going to build to sell or build to keep, needs to do a feasibility study. But also along with that, as I mentioned before, this term called scenario analysis. So you do a feasibility study based on what you think is going to happen. Then you do another feasibility study based on everything going well. And then you do another feasibility study based on everything going not so well. And in my opinion, if you can still make money, if everything goes poorly, and you can make about a 15% gross profit if everything goes as it should, then that's a pretty good numbers there, because it's very hard to go broke if you're making money.
So this is the old age of plan for the worst and hope for the best. And that's where I see most property investors get it wrong. They have dollar signs in their eyes and they're counting their dollars before they even break ground, and most of them stuff it up. And maybe it's going to be one of your points. Property development isn't for everyone either. No. You're best off not developing than developing if you're unsure about it. But we're going to go another break. When we come back, we're going to go through points 6 through 10 on how to get property development right. Back in a moment.
Are low interest rates impacting on your investment returns? It's time to rethink. Rethink Investing creates wealth for clients through the strategic purchase of positively geared, high cash flow commercial property. Industrial properties, retail assets, or office spaces can be a smart investment option that produces significant and long-term return on investment. Rethink your investment options and look to commercial property. Learn more at rethinkinvesting.com.au. Rethink Investing, Australia's #1 commercial buyers agency.
Welcome back, everyone. Phil Tarrant, host of the Smart Property Investment Show, with Peter Koulizos, chairman of the Property Investment Professional Australia. He's also the property professor. Are you a professor of property or something?
No, that's a nickname. That's not my title. Don't call me Professor Koulizos.
You're not Professor.
But because I teach and I research and I've written a couple of books, then that's where that term.
I like it. It's good. It's a good handle to have. So we're going through how to get property development right. And to my point before the break, it's not for everyone. So you're better off not doing it than doing it if you don't think you've got what it takes. But maybe this is going to happen in the point 6 through 10. Point number 6 for getting it right, Peter.
You got to work with the council. The council holds all the cards. The council will either approve with conditions or reject your development. And so it's at this stage that your project can be held up. And if you've already bought your site, your holding costs will be growing. And so you mentioned before about people that are inexperienced. If you are inexperienced, get a private town planner to help you. There's stacks of town planners in council, but you can hire your own town planner. But even before then, Phil, and I should have mentioned it right at the beginning, if you don't know much about property and you don't even have any investment property, don't bother developing. You can't go from zero to property developer. You need to have some investment properties first, get to understand property, the fundamentals of property, then you might want to go on to development. But, if property development was easy, Phil, everyone would be doing it.
Yeah, and the people that do it, I'm not going to say most get it wrong, but a lot do get it wrong. A lot of people blow their dough.
Many mum and dad developers get it wrong. You wouldn't know, because in the end, all you see is 2 or 3 or 4 beautiful townhouses, but you don't know the dollars behind that. And generally, if people set out to build and sell, and in the end they're going to keep 1 or 2, that's because they lost money. And if they sell it, they're going to materialize that loss. They're better off holding it. At least the rent is paying off most of the mortgage, and then at some time in the future, they will sell it. Yeah. Unfortunately, many mum and dad small-scale property developers get it wrong.
Yeah, they do. And even and if you tune into the Smart Property Investment Show, we share our portfolio, and it's quite a large portfolio in the big scheme of things. I'd like to think I know a fair bit about property investment, but I still haven't even tackled a development, even though I could probably find the right people to help me out with it. But my limitations are the fact that I just don't have the time to do it, and it's not a key priority or focus for me. I'm no doubt at a point in time I will do it when it's the right time to do it, and I'll just be more informed at that point in time. But I just don't have the bandwidth for it. I just don't want to deal with it, Peter. I can't be bothered with it.
Yeah, and Phil, you don't have to. You may go through your whole property investment career not developing, and that's fine. Again, you have to go back to step one. Why are you doing it? If you want to give up your day job, that's fantastic. But don't go to work on Monday and tell your boss, you quit, because the bank's not going to lend you any money. The reality is you still have to work while you're developing. Then later on, when you get some confidence in yourself, more importantly, the bank has confidence in you, then you might be able to either give up your day job, but you'll probably go half time and then slowly go to zero.
Yeah, it's just like a softly catchy monkey type thing. I hope I got that right. Point number 7, Peter.
Select a builder. So once you've got everything in place, you need to pick a builder. There'll be plenty of builders willing to build your development, but you need to find an appropriate builder, a licensed builder that has the right insurance, that has experience in building in that area. And I find word of mouth is the best way to select a builder. Basically, most builders will have the same contracts. They're either by the Master Builders Association or the Housing Industry Association. So the contracts are generally the same. One thing I would encourage people to ask, they probably won't get, is to include liquidated damages, which basically means if the builder is late, then the builder is going to pay you, the developer, a penalty. And the penalty is either the rent that you were going to get if they were finished, or it's your interest that you are paying. Because we said before, time is money. The longer it takes to finish, the less money you're going to make.
Yeah, the contract's important, and I don't want to dwell on it too much. There's probably another chat we can have. But what are there's normally a couple of different structures for a contract for engaging a builder? Yeah,
look, there's cost plus, which is, all the materials are going to cost $1 million. I'm going to charge you 15%. So it's going to cost $1,100,000 of those contracts, because then there is no incentive for the builder to keep the cost down. I like a fixed price contract. I'm going to sign a contract for $1 million. If the budget blows out, I don't want that to be my problem. Builder, you should have thought of that before you presented me with this contract. And so one thing I do is make sure that the builder includes the quotation for the foundations, because that's where a lot of variation can happen. Because we think we know what sort of soil there is, but once you go digging 1 or 2 meters, who knows what they're going to find? So if I've already done a soil test and an engineer has calculated the strength of my footings and foundations, then I give that to the builder and say, I want you to quote including the foundations, and I want a turnkey product. That's the other thing here, Phil. I'm not trying to save money by getting the builder just to do the building, and then I find somebody else to do the fencing and somebody else to do the landscaping. Builder does everything. So if there's an issue, there's one person I go to. That's the builder.
Good counsel. Point number 8, Peter.
Organise the finance. Now, borrowing for development is a lot different to borrowing for investment. Number one, you can't borrow as much. So for investment or your own home, you can borrow, say, 90%. For development, it's 70%. So generally, the bank will lend you 70% of the land value, and then they'll lend you 70% of the cost of the build. If you're going to build lots, then you might get into commercial finance, which is different. And if you're going to build lots, when I say lots, like more than 4, they might also ask you to have some sold off the plan before they lend you the money.
Yeah, it gets a lot more complicated, and you need to find yourself a very good mortgage broker to sort that sort of stuff out. Point number 9, Pete.
Project management. Like you were saying, Phil, you're not that experienced in development. You don't have a lot of time. One option is to get a project manager to do it all for you, maybe even find the property for you and develop it. I mean, that's obviously going to cost money, but if you finish up with, $1 million to $2 million worth of property, And even if they only grow at 5% per annum, that's pretty good. And along the way, you have some tax benefits. That's a bonus. That's like the cream on the cake.
So that's just the cost of doing business. And I know there is people that provide as a full, like residential property investment, you have buyers agents and property strategists that will hold your hand through the whole process. You can fundamentally outsource that as well. How do you go about working out whether or not someone's a good project manager for a development?
Again, word of mouth. Ask them what other projects they've done. Ask them if you can talk to that particular client to find out how well they did. I mean, you can go to people's websites and, their websites look very pretty, but, you want to get somebody where you can sleep well at night knowing that they're doing a good job.
That's good. All right. Finally, Peter, number 10.
All right. So speak to the local real estate agent and property managers, and you do that well before you even start, because you need the local knowledge to find out what the local market wants. How many bedrooms do they want? How many bathrooms? How do they want it configured? Do I have to have built-in robes in every bedroom? Or do I have to have ducted air conditioning? And the last one, Phil, this is number 10, is to understand the taxes. Because unlike property and residential property investment, when you're developing, even if it is residential property, then you have to worry about the GST. And if you don't account for the GST even before you buy the property, it can cost you a lot of money in unnecessary taxes. So the moral of the story there is go and see an accountant before you even go and buy the property.
And I've seen there's some cases, well-publicised cases around people getting criminal charges for failure for declaration of GC components in property development, where they're actually operating as a company but claiming it not as a company. And it could be pretty hard. Like, it's tax avoidance, right? You got to get that right. Got to get
tax
right on top of it.
Tax minimisation is good, but tax avoidance, no.
That's bad.
You go to jail.
Tax avoidance is bad. But thanks for that, Peter. That was really good. For some reason, I've got 11 here, and I'll go through them quickly. Number 1, goal setting. Number 2, research. Number 3, find a development site. Number 4, draw up your plans. Number 5, crunch numbers. That's feasibility studies and looking at the parameters of it. Number 6, work effectively with council. 7, select a very good builder. Number 8, make sure you get your finance right. I had 9 as project management. 10, engage a real estate agent, property manager early so you know what product you need to make. And then number 11, taxes. I don't know how I got that wrong.
Yeah, no, you're right, mate. We got 11. I've split one of them into 2. We got 11.
I like it. Yeah, I mixed it up. But Peter, look, thanks so much, mate. We've just had a lesson in property development in 30, 40 minutes or so. So there's a lot more to it than this. This is just pretty much an introduction to property development course with the property professor. But thanks so much, mate. Where can people read more about this stuff? I know you sort of produce a fair bit of commentary around this.
Yeah, so if people Google my name and Property Development 101, there's a series of 10 articles based on these 10 steps or 11 steps.
11 steps.
If they Google my name, Property Development 101 videos, I actually recorded a development that I did in a seaside suburb of Adelaide. They can watch those videos. And until Margaret's book and my book comes out, there is a great Australian author. His name is Ron Forley, Forlle. He's written 3 books on small-scale residential property development. I'd encourage you to get those books and read them.
That's very good advice and recommendations, Peter. Thanks so much for your time today.
Pleasure, mate. Anytime.
Nice one. Remember to check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. If you're not yet subscribing to our daily morning newsletter, so the first to know what's going on with property right across the nation, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Social media, Smart Property HQ is where you can find us. And please, quick favour, those reviews, wherever you listen to this, iTunes, etc., the team get a real kick out of them, and it helps us shape how we approach this moving forward. We'll be back again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
Are you in the real estate industry? We're on the lookout for Australia's best agents, networks and property managers to enter the REV Awards 2021 with principal partner List Ready. The awards provide an invaluable opportunity to showcase your contribution to the industry, raise your profile on the national stage and celebrate your achievements with your peers. Nominations close in November. Start your nomination now at realestatebusinessawards.com.au/REB-awards.